and I think too, I think one of the aspects of chaplaincy that I love is um, even being able to be ministering to someone where you don't agree with them, or where their belief system may you know, not line up with yours, and finding it's almost like water. It looks for cracks, not obstacles. You know, I mean, it goes deep. So you hit the barrier, you know, or the objection or whatever it is, and you find some other place that's open, and you just keep moving through those openings. And often you can be with um, an atheist family, or someone of another faith, and maybe they've even openly identified, I don't need a chaplain, I don't want a chaplain, etc. And I always think of Bill Youngblood. He'll tell them, well, just think of me as a friend and an advocate. I'm just here for you, and I'll be standing over in the corner if you need me. Tap me on the shoulder. um, and you see people, they're touched, and sometimes uh, uh, they sort of, you see them at the end, you know, something struck them. I've even had atheist families say, "This is really strange, but we'd like you to pray for us."
Yeah.
You know, like they know they need something, um, uh, and uh, so it's very interesting. I wanted to just touch base. The whole time we're talking, I have my things open for our screen sharing, and I keep looking at this picture that you had shared with me, and I just got to have you talk about it. And let me just pull it up here.
Okay.
So let me know if you can see it. Can you see that?
Yeah. Yeah. So this is an icon by a Russian iconographer named Rublev. And this is sometimes called the Holy Trinity, but it's also an icon that's named the hospitality of strangers.
Mm,
And it comes out of the story, I think it's Genesis, yeah, where Abraham and Sarah, are out in the wilderness and these three strangers visit them. And they offer them a cup of water and they offer them food. And then these strangers turn out to be the angels that tell Sarah she's going to have
mm,
a baby. So the way this icon is positioned is a reminder to me of when we enter a scene, there's space for us to enter this scene. And so it's an invitation to welcome the stranger. I think it's where the phrase comes from, you never know when you might be entertaining angels.
mm. Yeah.
Um, so, sometimes we don't need our religious agenda to be with people. We just need to show up and offer hospitality and be in a posture of welcoming the stranger. The stranger may be the scene itself. The stranger may be the crisis. Uh, the stranger's the person I'm visiting. I'm a stranger to them. There's all this stranger there. So if we can welcome the stranger in this way, knowing that we are held by something greater.
Mm.
And I love this. This is what I see as a communion cup, but on a crisis
Yeah.
need, one wonderful connective way is to offer someone a cup of water or a
Yeah.
bottle of water. And you don't have
Mhm.
to talk about religion or prayer. You just offer them a bottle of water. And, this is really a hard place to be. We don't need to talk. I'm here if you need me. So, I love this icon as an invitation to hospitality,
Mhm.
which almost every tradition uh, in the world has some moral code of offering hospitality and welcoming the stranger.
Yeah.
Um, so, yeah.
And I think too, there's a sense in chaplaincy, often it's a being more than a doing. So if we've done our inner work of welcoming the stranger within us, you know, our own stranger, or our own weaknesses and vulnerabilities, and you know, we're honest and grace filled with that, then when we're in the presence of others, they sense that you have an openness and a space to hold what they struggle with, what they question, what they have joy with. which again, I always come back to when you talk about holding space. I think it's such a powerful dynamic. Um, you were saying about handing a bottle of water. Uh, if you were with someone and say you didn't know their spirituality and you're doing your ministry in silence, maybe it's handing a bottle of water, maybe it's standing there. What would be the subtext you'd want, you know, the closed captioning to say about your body language, about your presence, about the spirit within you
Mhm.
um, as you do that ministry in silence?
I think body language is an important piece to name. I tend to move hurriedly whenever I'm called to a scene. That's another governor I put on myself or become aware of. So I intentionally move more slowly. I
Mhm.
intentionally talk more slowly.
Mm,
Um, I make eye contact, but when I'm making eye contact, I'm noticing whether they're returning the eye contact or if they're avoiding it, and then I key off of that. So
mhm.
any way to not be intrusive, but just be like alongside. So even
Sure.
sometimes when I'm offering water or I'm talking to someone, I choose to sit in a side position, not a direct in front
Mm,
of position.
yeah.
I think it just offers more space and, a lot of times people are anxious. They may not name it this way, but I'm this way. I need to know I have an out.
Sure.
Um,
Yeah.
so if someone's right here, that feels less
Mm,
room for me to
yeah.
have my own thoughts and my own grief and my own worry and my own fear. Um,
Mhm.
so yeah, body language, presence, uh, even something like here's a bottle of water. I don't know if you want it or not, but I'm gonna leave it here. And
Yeah. Yeah.
just depending on sort of what I've gleaned, but
Mhm.
you can tell if I think you can most of us can tell just intuitively whether we've had any chaplaincy training or not, if people want you to move in or out,
Mhm.
if they want
Sure.
you there
Yeah.
or not. And
Mhm.
often it's when you can show them you have no hidden agenda,
Mm.
you're gonna stand over to the side. That's
Yeah.
when they're paying attention. We don't always know how carefully people are watching us
Mhm.
from their side eyes,
Yeah. Yeah.
responding what we're doing. And so if they realize we don't have an agenda to promote, they're often more willing to move in towards us.
Yeah.
And I think of chaplaincy as a dance. And
Mhm.
I try to follow
Mm.
the lead of the person I'm there. I may not know the music. I
Yeah.
most often don't know the music or the steps or what their rhythm is. I just don't want to step on their toes. So I'm being very careful about how they're moving and trying to synchronize my body language, my words, my cadence,
Mhm.
anything I can with what I'm perceiving about where they are.
Yeah. And I think the beauty of it is you do that as a chaplain in authenticity to your own faith and also in authentic respect, curiosity, uh, holding space for what their deepest meaning or faith is, and and, uh, and people. I think people can sense that,
Mhm.
and that's. I wanted to touch base too on. Uh, So you had mentioned about the airport. I think of all the different people going through an airport, or in a hospital, all the different faith traditions. Um, so you had mentioned about an app that you found helpful. Do you mind if I bring that up and maybe say a
I'd
few
love
words on how that's been helpful? I'm mindful of when you were talking about language earlier. When we lived in South Florida for a few years, and we're in Miami area, and my wife's Cuban, speaks Spanish. I speak basic Spanish, and I would go to the Sedano's or the local supermarket, and people would not really engage with me. And I remember checking out at the cashier, and I commented on one of the foods I was getting. I said, "Oh, this is so good," and she just sort of looked at me. She was bilingual and all, but I didn't know that until later. But but she just sort of looked at me, and then so I said in Spanish, and she sort of looked over at me, and she really appreciated the fact that I um, was making the effort. And um, but I've also had on the flip side times where I've spoken Spanish first and someone will return it in perfect English as if to say, why would you assume that I don't know? So
Yeah.
it's a bit of a, trying to guess in life and ministry. But um, I love your approach earlier with saying, hey, you know, I'm of a different faith tradition, but I'm going to do my best to say this or to help you in a way specific to you. And this tool seems like a great one to use. So let me pull it up and then maybe you can tell us about it.
Okay.
Okay. Can
Yeah.
you see that?
Yes, it's a
Okay.
and then also if you have the app is called Disaster and Religions, and it's a little purple square. Um,
And it's on the App Store for, I know, for iPhones.
yes.
It's on, you can see it on there. Um, if you pull it up, just type in disasters and religions, and then
Yeah.
you'll see this.
This
Um,
is a really
come
well
over.
researched and reliable app in terms of I think it was developed by the Red Cross, and I think I learned of it through some disaster training at that the Red Cross offers. But um, what's wonderful about it is you can tap on it and it gives you a selection of, I didn't count how many, but like 4 screens worth of. So this one that says religion, you can
Yeah.
tap on that religion. So for example, yeah. So if I go to Hinduism, it says it's the world's oldest organized religion, approximately 2
Mhm.
million people. Then it talks about their belief systems. It gives you their first points of contact. Um, Talks about their religious leaders, how what they're called, a guru or a swami. It tells you greetings. It tells you cultural and social interactions, their houses of worship, common language, how they might view being ministered to by different genders,
Wow.
uh,
Wow.
healthcare, death customs. I mean, it's got
Mhm.
everything, and it's just for me, it's sort of a grounding. I mean, none of well, I that's a total assumption. I was just saying none of us have graduate degrees in world religions. I certainly don't.
Yeah.
There
I
might
got
be some,
that.
but it's not that I'm trying to absorb all of this
Mhm.
material in a way that I can try to speak to them out of a knowing place, but it
Mhm.
gives me enough that I might know for a strictly practicing Hindu, I show
Mhm.
up at the time of death, and it's not really gonna connect because I'm a female. So,
Mm. Yeah.
I might go get a male or tell them, "I help me know, but I'm thinking probably a male chaplain would feel more connected to
Mhm.
you than me," and they'll say yes.
Yeah.
And so then I can help them meet their need. So, I
Mhm.
think we also need to remember not to take things personally,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
but this is a great go-to
Mhm.
app on the road. Um
Yeah.
if you show up and just, you know nothing about, like, you
Mhm.
might you might get to a you might get to a Muslim household and offer them, they could have water, but if it's Ramadan and you offer them a snack,
Yeah.
then they'll say, "Well, it's Ramadan." Then, you might wanna go to your car and go under
Yeah.
Islam. Um,
I
yes,
I
Islam is the religion, and,
yeah.
Muslim is the practitioner of the religion. Um,
Mhm.
so just that little example,
Yeah.
that would be, and just naming, "Oh my gosh, I'm sorry. Tell me
Mhm.
more about that," or however you wanted to do that. Um,
It's a wonderful tool, and I think being on a scene, if you recognize a different faith, you're moving around the scene, so you have the opportunity to just sort of step outside and pull out your phone, read a little bit, and be a little versed in it. I always joke around that Imam Boris and I get together for something to eat, and I love when he treats me to lunch during Ramadan. We'll eat at the steakhouse, and And I'll just have a wonderful I always joke with him about that. He
Yeah.
was, yeah, you know, I need to treat him. But sometimes I won't recognize, I won't realize, uh, or just not understanding different foods, or just all of those things. Can I ask you too about, like, just practical things with inclusive language? Uh, I remember one time, um, someone that asked me to do a evangelistic sermon, and I did, and folks came forward afterwards for prayer, and I noticed someone who seemed really impacted, and they during the sermon, but they looked like they wanted to come forward for prayer but didn't, and they were just sort of looking at me. And afterwards, when things were finishing up, this woman approached me and said, "I just want you to know, what you said really touched me, and so on and so forth. And um, but I wanted to come forward for prayer, but I really struggled because your closing prayer after your sermon, you kept saying Father, and she had been violated by her father growing up, and she said it was just too hard for her to engage in intimacy with God because of the way I prayed. And before that, I had always thought, it's Jesus said our Father, so it's in the Bible, so people just have to get over it. And then, when you have someone who's actually been through something, you
Mhm.
think very differently, um, whether it's something horrible like that, or other life situations. But I really had to rethink the way I use language in prayer, and I don't know that I figured it out. But um, what can you say to us about some of these issues in in using practical inclusive language in spiritual care?
I think it goes back to your earlier naming of not watering things down so much that they lose their meaning, but also being aware of what might exclude someone. And that's a
Mm,
beautiful example of that. Not everyone believes that God is male, and our Father in the Bible, I think it's important to remember that religion has always been influenced by culture and who's in power. And that was a very patriarchal society when the Bible was written. So, they wanted their religion to survive. So they were speaking in the language of the time.
mhm,
But also in one of the Genesis stories, God created them male and female. There is an equality there. And certainly, male language can exclude some people. Personally, I try to use the word God instead of a pronoun.
mhm,
Sometimes that gets a little redundant, but
mhm.
or often I'll pray, and if it's a interfaith or interreligious, or Mayor Tecklenburg prayed one of his few days right before he was leaving office in the January month at City Hall when they were proclaiming January as Interfaith Month. He
Yeah.
prayed to the God of each of our understandings.
Mm,
That's how
yeah.
he opened it, and I was so appreciative of that. And then the two flautists who are, I believe, may have been high school students, not college. Um, they played on dueling flutes, John Lennon's "Imagine," and it was just so
Wow.
moving
Yeah.
and touching. And
Mhm.
and so, yeah, I like to err on the side of the larger picture.
Yeah.
And then in conversation, if I'm with someone and they're referring to God as he or him or our Father, then I go with that. I mean,
Yeah.
I go with that, and I try to ask people, "What tell me about the God of your understanding."
Mm, yeah.
So language, I think, is important. The way we
Mhm.
use our words informs the way we think. It informs the lens that we see through. And so I'm often very appreciative of being corrected if I
Mhm.
am blind to some
Mm,
of my prejudices, which by our human nature, we all are. We can't see
yeah,
behind us. We
yeah,
cannot see
yeah.
behind us. And
Mhm.
I like to think sometimes of, I'm walking around clumsily with this baggage behind me, and I'm walking through a room, and I might be knocking things over, and I'm completely unaware of it.
Yeah, you know, yeah,
Everybody else is seeing it, and,
yeah.
so to remember that we all do that. That's
Mhm.
part of who we are as humans. We cannot see in 360.
Yeah,
We
yeah,
need other lenses, and we need other people to help us see the larger picture.
yeah.
The other
And
thing, oh, go ahead.
mhm. No, go ahead, go ahead.
I just wanted to name when you were talking about the app and those, you know, so there's one for Protestant Christian, there's one for Muslims, but if you've met one Muslim or one Jew or one Christian, you've met one. Eh,
Mhm.
you know,
Yeah, yeah,
within our own traditions of Christian theology, there are so many varying ways of that. So we can't even bank on the fact that we're Christian as being spiritually inclusive.
yeah,
There are
yeah.
lots of strains of that.
Mhm.
You know,
Yeah.
uh,
And I think, there's these, ways of understanding it, where, my faith, may not have any room for someone else's beliefs, but I have to care for them spiritually, or my faith has room for their faith, and it can sort of be included in it, and I have to spiritually care for them. Or the other third one might be, they have their faith, I have my faith, and they don't connect, but there's room for all of them. So, figuring out how, again, that to hold space wherever your theology is, or your belief system, even if, your belief system doesn't have room for what they believe, God has still called you to care for them, and God is waiting for you in the midst of what they're experiencing. And who am I to say, no, I'm sorry, because of my doctrine, I can't do what God's calling me to do. Um, I think, there's some deep soul searching, and like you said, trying to look at what are we carrying behind us that might be knocking things over. I'll just say this real quick. I've been trying to avoid chasing the sun the whole time, and all I
Rich,
can
God
think
has
about
been
is
all over your face for most of this conversation.
it's like, well, I
Light
put
and
this
hide the
board up
light.
there to block it, and then the sun comes out. Well, we're shining the light. We have to be sensitive, not to blind people, and help folks. And here I am trying to avoid the light. I need the light, otherwise you won't see me. But it's blinding me. Um, I'll just ask you uh, what other thoughts do you have on spiritual inclusivity that maybe we hadn't mentioned or talked through?
I think, and maybe in closing, I just think I go back to spirituality as being part of the human condition. And so, if we
Mhm.
can just join people from that baseline of one human being,
Mm,
one incarnated, infleshed, breathing human being next to another
mm,
is just the baseline of our existence, really. And
mm,
so if you strip it to its bare, so if you take away all religion or take away all skin color, take away all gender identities, it's just one human being next to another can be such
mhm,
a comfort. The image that's come into my mind, I don't know why, but those young, boys, I can't remember, it was a sports team, and they got caught in the cave.
mm. Yeah, yeah.
They and the water started coming in, and this whole community and divers from all over the world that didn't speak the same language, didn't even know about religious affiliations. They come because they had the skill set needed to
Mm,
dive into this cave, and
yeah.
then they had to make a decision whether to drug these young people because their natural bodily response to being pulled underwater to be pulled out with scuba gear
Mm,
on would
yeah.
be frightening, and then it would, so I think they gave him ketamine. But anyway, there were all these decisions to be made,
Mm,
not a lot of time to make them, but the baseline of that is human care for one another.
mm. Yeah.
The life-giving care that I think is innately in us when we're born. We are born to be in community. We're born to belonging. We're born to love. We're born for connection. Um, and so s in some ways, just showing up with love in our hearts
Mhm.
you can take this whole conversation and distill it into that.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. If we have the confidence that God is love, then probably any form of love is going to transmit the Spirit of God. Well, Barbara, it's been wonderful talking with you, and I love your heart and your passion for spiritual inclusivity and uh, and really at its core, just being able to connect with someone on whatever level that God provides an opening to, and to draw meaning from that. It's just very powerful. Um, may I ask you to close us in prayer, maybe for our chaplains or whoever is watching, maybe a prayer of encouragement for them as they grow in spiritual inclusivity or interact with folks in very diverse settings.
Thank you for this opportunity, and thank you for your leadership with Coastal, and to anyone who's listening, a first responder or other chaplains, thank you for the opportunity for my own growth being part of this process. Holy One, creator of all, gracious God, we give you thanks for the opportunity to be in ministry with you. Open our eyes of the heart, open our ears of the heart, and open our hearts to all the ways that you express your love in creation. Help us join that love in ways that lift others up, in ways that comfort, in ways that offer light and hope. Help us to always remember that your view is large, and help us in our small ways to participate in that. In your holy name we pray. Amen.
Amen.